What if Kevin Feige left Marvel? That's the title of an article from Wednesday, August 11th, and with all the recent news on the ScarJo lawsuit and the resulting frustration of Kevin Feige with top Disney brass and the likely continued decline of financial performance of the Phase 4 MCU, I'm starting to think a guy like Bob Chapek just might be asking himself the same question. Here we go. Renegade Online. Well, I appreciate y'all being here for another day at Valiant Renegade. Make sure you got that like button smashed, the subscribe smashed, hit that notification bell, and please do share out the video. We have quite a bit of information to cover today, so I want you to sit tight. Make sure you stick around this one all the way to the end, because I'm going to give you a lot to think about on this one. And it might be something that we could see down the road potentially as more of this news comes out. I keep asking myself more and more questions about this kind of stuff. But most importantly, thank you guys for being here. This channel would not be where it is without your support. So let's get on with it. So this is going to be a little different than my normal video. The first part will be a narrative discussion on the article that we introduced just a moment ago, and the second will be my discussion with the great Cameron Pasha, notorious Hollywood insider and screenwriter, to share his thoughts on just what we're talking about today. So here we go. It's hardly a secret at this point that neither Bob Chapek or Kevin Feige is particularly happy with this Black Widow thing. The problem, of course, is the old he said, she said situation that only a court can decide now, or perhaps the legal teams of each party involved settling out of court, as it's highly unlikely the public will ever know the details of ScarJo's contract with Disney Marvel, as contracts of those sorts are almost always held under a legally binding, non-disclosure agreement. Now, time will tell where this saga winds up, but buried beneath it are a new set of questions raised by articles like this one from Observer, positing what it could be if Marvel studio icon Kevin Feige left. And the more I see, the more I begin to wonder myself if Bob Chapek isn't playing a very long game of 4D chess right now to find out exactly what that would look like. Now, stick with me on this one, because we're going to go down a pretty deep rabbit hole, and it's going to take a lot of winding tunnels to get where we need to go and find the nest at the end. So make sure you stick around all the way through this video. I promise you, it's worth it. Let's first read a couple of parts of this news story to set the stage. Then, we're going to go back and cover some previous articles about just who Chapek and Feige are, how we got here, and finally, where I think Chapek might be going with this and why. Back in 2015, Marvel Studios head honcho Kevin Feige threatened to leave Marvel over increasing tensions between himself and former Marvel Entertainment CEO Ike Perlmutter. Now, we've covered that here on this channel before. To smooth the situation over, then CEO Bob Iger restructured the hierarchy so that Kevin Feige reported directly to him. Crisis averted, but Hollywood is a constantly swirling storm where the seas rarely stay calm for long. And again, we've reported on that as well in recent videos, talking about this is the same metric that basically was used for Jon Favreau to do an in-run around Kathleen Kennedy to Bob Iger when Lucasfilm hit the skids. In a recent What I'm Hearing newsletter from former The Hollywood Reporter, editor Matthew Baloney, it was reported that Feige pushed Disney to keep Black Widow as an exclusive theatrical release to avoid alienating ScarJo. Now, obviously, that didn't happen. Johansson is now suing Disney, and the Mouse House is lambasting her in the press, drawing the ire of Women in Film, Reframe, and Time's Up in the process. Quote, Feige's a company man. He's not prone to corporate showdowns or shouting matches, but I'm told he's angry and embarrassed, Baloney reports. He lobbied Disney against the day-and-date plan for Black Widow, preferring the big screen exclusivity and not wanting to upset his talent. In previous videos, I've discussed an overview of the early Disney days of Marvel. Kevin Feige wasn't in full command back in the days when the grand architecture of the first three phases of the MCU were being established. Still, much of that credit has to go to Jon Favreau and his vision, beginning it with Iron Man to build out the MCU one superhero at a time and have it all collide with Avengers. Kevin Feige's virtual autonomy at Marvel Disney really began in 2019 when his contract was renewed, and he was granted a second title of Executive Creative Director over Marvel. Now, certainly Feige gets a lot of deserved credit for steering the MCU into the biggest theatrical payday of all time with Endgame, but it could be argued that a lot of that groundwork and architecture was in place for that to happen before Feige took the big chair in 2015 following Ike Perlmutter's departure. And even after then, Alan Horn, creative director over all of Disney, still had a lot of input for Marvel. In other words, it would have been difficult for Feige to wreck the already robust MCU by that point. All he had to do was not rock the boat and let the tide bring it in. But everything developed from 2019 afterward is squarely on Kevin Feige's shoulders, everything after Endgame. And there's no one else to share the credit or the blame for its performance. Quote, if Kevin Feige left the Marvel empire, it would be like Thanos snapping his fingers and having half of Disney's riches immediately disappear. I believe he's that integral, Jeff Brock, senior box office analyst at Exhibitor Relations, told Observer. Marvel utilizes a deeply entrenched producer-driven model that keeps the sprawling multimedia shared cinematic universe flowing as a successful tornado of organized chaos. Replacing the stewardship of such a leviathan is possible, but not without immense difficulty and a few raised eyebrows at key nexus points of the Hollywood business industrial complex. Quote, Disney shares would clearly suffer if Feige left, Steve Bierenberg, founder of Northlake Capital Management, told Observer. Beyond the loss of the most important executive in what is arguably the company's most important IP, the timing would be poor, as Phase 4 of the MCU is just getting started and leaves behind some sure winners for new characters and stories. I suspect another executive could lead Marvel and still produce lots of good films and TV shows, but Wall Street would see a new and significant uncertainty and mark down Disney shares. But would they really? That's the question we want to examine today. Following the massive nearly $3 billion success of Endgame, Kevin Feige seemed Hollywood's most indestructible studio exec. But this is 2021. The MCU that brought in tens of billions of dollars is 2 years behind us, and there has so far been nothing from Feige and Marvel Studios that has even sniffed that again. Black Widow was a relative dud. Shang-Chi and the Eternals look as if they might perform even more poorly because, unlike ScarJo, nobody knows who these characters are. And because Feige did absolutely nothing to set them up in Phase 3 as a lead-in to this new era, audiences don't seem to care. In fact, there's more anticipation for Doctor Strange 2, which is still a year away, and Spider-Man 3, which is really a Sony Pictures film in a joint venture with the MCU. Even the Feige properties on Disney Plus have had lukewarm receptions at best, all at the same time Kevin Feige was publicly proclaiming to the world just how, quote, woke Phase 4 was going to be. So new Feige MCU is following the same failed script now as so many other once great, now destroyed properties. As I've stated before, Marvel is now in 2021 where Star Wars was in 2015. A huge IP, fresh off of a huge success, and a studio head itching to inject it with leftist, social, political messaging to show off to their Hollywood elitist friends, thinking their brand is absolutely bulletproof, and the audiences will just keep showing up no matter what. The problem, of course, is if you instead find yourself drop 2 or 3 box office flops in a row, like I think we're about to see from Feige before year end, you ask yourself just how indestructible is this IP with bad leadership? A guy like Bob Chapek only has to glance slightly to the left of Feige and see Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm sitting next to him to answer that question. You see, Bob Chapek is a very different CEO than Bob Iger. Iger was a Hollywood animal. Chapek isn't. You have to imagine a guy like Chapek was an easy choice for the Disney stockholders who own the largest voting interests. Mutual fund companies like Vanguard, State Street, BlackRock, whose mindset for what they expect so far as returns and performance is best explained by Ray Stantz and Ghostbusters.
You don't know what it's like out there. I've worked in the private sector. They expect results.
In February 2020, an article in Variety gave the world a glimpse of just who Bob Chapek is and why those stockholders wanted him at the helm. From the article, Chapek's resume had something the others lacked. He's had a tour of the company's operations over his 23-year tenure, from heading consumer products to leading film distribution and home entertainment, to running the theme parks division for the past 5 years. He knows the company inside and out, and internally, he is respected and well-liked. For the extremely difficult task of filling Iger's shoes at an enterprise as mammoth as Disney, those qualities are essential. Chapek's biggest challenge will be grappling with the myriad creative issues that arise for Disney, particularly on large-scale projects. He has no hands-on creative experience, unlike Iger, who came to the job after years of experience with entertainment and sports programming from his earlier tenure at ABC. Chapek's ability to schmooze with talent and court top filmmakers will be tested at a time when there is no shortage of studios chasing A-listers. In the words of a senior Disney exec, Chapek is a, quote, consummate operator and a loyalist through and through. Sources say he has demonstrated over and over that he runs his business, quote, with a company agenda, not a political agenda, which is made for easy collaborations. He's also described as an extremely down-to-earth and approachable guy. Quote, he's personable, but not a big personality, says an unnamed Disney veteran. See, Bob Chapek strikes me as an outside-the-Hollywood bubble type that probably doesn't care about your politics, provided that you stand and deliver actual results. But if the politics and messaging is alienating diehard fan bases and driving away otherwise paying customers, well, Chapek will go Dean Wormer on you.
Then, as of this moment, they're on double secret probation.
And Chapek has been the head of both film and home entertainment distribution and head of consumer products for Disney over his 23-year career there, in addition to managing Disney's biggest cash cow, the Parks and Resorts division. See, if a studio head starts handing a guy like Chapek movies that audiences by and large no longer want to pay for, that spawns merchandise he can't sell, and offers no new reason to bring new money into the parks, Chapek probably won't be a happy camper. Matter of fact, it's been publicly reported that Bob Chapek is changing quite a bit at Disney, from moving 2,000 mid- and upper-level parks management jobs out of California and over to Florida. And that's just the beginning. As well as making it known that long-term executive contracts at Disney are going to be a thing of the past. Initially, everyone assumed Kathy Kennedy was at least one driving force for that change, after being stuck with an almost lifeless asset like Star Wars that only Jon Favreau managed to keep from dying completely. But the reality is Kevin Feige's contract renewal and new powers granted in 2019 is probably at least as long as Kathy's 3 years from 2018, if not more. And if Feige starts churning out one dud after the next from Phase 4 of the MCU, well, Chapek will be none too happy to be stuck with him either. Right now, Feige's upset with Chapek for not going theatrically exclusive with Black Widow and the resulting fallout. I can understand that. But I wonder if Chapek didn't calculate this to some extent. Seeing the financial direction the MCU is headed, seeing the slowing and relative non-existence of new merchandising from new Phase 4 characters, like Shang-Chi, already hitting bargain shelves before the movie even drops. Feige wants theatrical exclusives, even missing the China windows completely, because Feige thinks that's all he needs to restart this MCU engine. But then again, Bob Chapek also understands the perils of catering to the China market, especially after seeing how poorly received Mulan and Raya were. Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and the Eternals, well, they all got the boot. Part of me wonders, is Bob Chapek granting Feige's wish for Shang-Chi and the Eternals, if only to give Feige enough rope with which to hang himself? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure Chapek would much rather have those films perform up to Marvel par, bringing in billions of fresh revenues from films, merchandise, DVD sales, etc. But if they don't, Bob Chapek will have gained the strong upper hand with investors as Feige's leadership capital takes a devastating blow. Because, you see, Feige was not Bob Chapek's guy. And neither was Kathleen Kennedy. Those were Bob Iger people. Chapek may have managed film and TV distribution, a focus he wants to take Disney back to. But he never managed studio production. His hands in any such failures are clean. And if those movies flop, as many believe they will, Chapek and the stockholders might not think Feige leaving is all that bad an idea anymore. And as promised, here's part 2, my discussion with Cameron Pasha. We are talking about the ScarJo lawsuit. We are talking about the tension, presumably, what we can tell from what's being reported, between Kevin Feige and new Disney CEO Bob Chapek. They come from obviously very different ends of the business spectrum, especially in Disney. We also discussed, what Chapek's game might be at this point with, okay, Feige didn't like the fact that we did premiere access for Black Widow, so we're going to go theatrical only for Shang-Chi. We're going to go theatrical only for the Eternals, which seemingly has no buzz around it. This is not the MCU phase 1, 2, and 3. MCU phase 4 is obviously very different, and the hype just doesn't seem to be there. And is Bob Chapek basically just handing Kevin Feige the rope and go, here, if you win, great, I look like a genius. But if you hang yourself, your clout is gone, and your future. I don't have to worry about what people will say if you leave anymore. So, Cameron, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I believe Bob Chapek will prove to be a revolutionary figure in this industry. I've been incredibly impressed by his Machiavellian tactics and his long-term strategy in dealing with very powerful, very entrenched people such as Kathleen Kennedy and now Kevin Feige. He puts them in positions where they blow their own wad, where they overload on their own ego and overload on their own story, so that he doesn't have to do anything. Right? It's what happened with Ms. Kennedy. He let her walk into the I'm not sure that he knew that the Carano situation would blow up the way it is, but he let her walk right into it, right? And let her stew in that, and she basically vanished after that. And we saw Miss Carano now already has her movie announced. It sounds like a very compelling movie that she's doing, the next one. And so this gentleman is really impressed me. A lot of people in the fandom don't understand him, and that's why they should understand. People in the town don't understand him. That's why he's outsmarting them, because he is not behaving in the ways that one would normally expect. And that's why he's outsmarting his adversaries, right? His adversaries are used to a certain kind of personality with Bob Iger, who loved the prestige and the fame and the glamour and having the cool club people around him, right? This guy is all about, I'm trying to make money for the shareholders, and we have not made money for the past several years, and I know because I'm a bean counter, and so I've seen it. And so I'm not impressed with glamour. I'm not impressed with glitter, and I don't like egos who are messing up the bottom line of my company and my shareholders, right? So I'm going to cause these egos to blow their own wad, and that's what happened with Kennedy, I believe, and that's what we're witnessing now with Feige. And I've said this on Midnight's Edge and other channels, where he is basically in a war with Kevin Feige, and people said Feige's going to win this. He's outsmarted people in the past. Like, he hasn't outsmarted this guy, right?
Nope.
And he's not in the position that he was in 3 years ago. That's what it is. The MCU, that's the only reason there's this conflict happening, is because Bob Chapek knows the MCU in this current phase ain't nothing that impressive. He knows that.
No.
He knows that. He's seeing the bottom line numbers. He's seeing the buzz that's out there amongst the customer base, which is all that he cares about, right?
Yep.
For these projects. And so, look, I was and remain a fan of Black Widow. I understand why strategically he may have decided, Chapek decided, look, we're in the middle of this horrible lockdown situation. This character is already dead. If this movie should have come out, it should have come out before Endgame, right? But now we're stuck with it, and it's not gonna. And we're in this ridiculous situation. So I'm gonna try to maximize getting what I can on the streaming side of it. And he put it out there. I would have loved it to have done more successfully theatrically, but he's between a rock and a hard place, and he made that decision. I think Mr. Feige took it very personally because he's used to people doing what he wants with his stuff. He's used to Bob Iger deferring to him, right? And so I'm sure Bob Iger deferred to him when he said, "I don't want to do a Black Widow movie right now. I want to do this, this this Captain Marvel thing, right? And throw that. It literally feels like a wheel that it's like something thrown into the jam of this system. Like, where's this coming from, right? So, and there's lots of stories that it was Bob Iger's idea. I'm not sure it was Bob Iger's idea. I think this was Kevin Feige's idea. But he was used to people deferring to it and even taking it on. That was my idea. Yeah, that's what we did. He's not used to somebody saying, "No, we're going to do it this way," right? And I think this is the best way to maximize the income on this thing that's probably going to be a dud, even though I don't think Black Widow deserved to be a dud. Whether that's would have been a dud if it had been purely theatrical release and waited, a certain window before it came out Disney Plus. Who knows? We don't know that now, right? But that was a play that he had. But the offense that it caused Kevin Feige has led to this eruption. And I personally believe that the events that we have seen with Scarlett Johansson suing Disney, and it's becoming very vituperative, very personal attacks, both by her team and by Disney against each other. It's coming from a place where nobody saw this coming, right? Nobody saw this coming. And I'm sure Bob Chapek, when he got the call from legal affairs, hey, we've got a lawsuit handed into the office from Scarlett Johansson's attorney. I'm sure he was immediately on the phone with Scarlett Johansson's agent, who is the head of CAA, the top agency in Hollywood. He's like, well, what the hell are you doing? We should have talked about this man to man. Why am I getting a lawsuit? Right? You should have called me yesterday and we would have resolved this. And so and he got angry because this was clearly something else that wasn't just about the money, because it would be resolved in one phone call so that this PR disaster didn't happen. So he's like, someone's trying to screw me. Someone's trying to create a PR disaster around me. And he's like, well, who would be telling Scarlett Johansson this is a good idea? Her old friend, Kevin Feige. And so he's like, oh, you're going to try to do this? You're going to try to send a minion after me? Is that what this game is? All right. Okay, you think you don't know who you're playing with. I just took out Kathleen Kennedy, who was impossible to take out for a decade, and people in Disney wanted her out. Nobody could do it. I took care of it. So you think you're going to do this to me? Okay. Oh, you are upset that I put Black Widow on, on streaming as well as on theaters. Good. It's all yours, buddy. Shang-Chi, this is going to be, this thing's going to be great. All theaters, and this Eternals, it's going to be great. And as someone who's a fan of Marvel, as someone fan of these movies, I saw these the trailers for both these. And I'm like, I ain't gonna watch this. I don't know who these characters are. I don't know what this is.
That's one of the things I talked about in the video. And just to kind of go back just 1 second real quick on some of the things you said, I agree with you, everything you said about Chapek. The guy is much more business-minded than what Hollywood is really used to, quite frankly.
He's not into the glamour. They don't understand that. They get seduced by glamour, and he doesn't. They don't know how to deal with a guy like that.
No, and it strikes me that Bob Chapek is a lot more akin to the David Zaslav type that's coming in to basically overhaul Warner right now, put in there by John Stankey, the CEO of AT&T, their parent company, after the merger.
Which I think is an incredibly good move. I'm a huge fan of Discovery. Yeah, I watch Discovery Plus I watch it every night. There's always something on Discovery Plus I'm watching, right? Because
short
it's
of
so
Netflix,
fun and customer oriented.
Yeah, short of Netflix, there is no streaming service out there that makes the kind of bank that David Zaslav and Discovery does in average revenue per user for what they charge that they do. And it's astonishing. And it wasn't long after that announcement of David Zaslav and that whole merger issue. It was right around the same time that HBO Max introduced the $9.99 monthly subscription service with ads. Yep. So I don't think that was an accident. But I think Chapek is much more of that type of mindset. And you're right. I don't think they know what to do with this guy because, and as I stated in the narrative portion of this video, I don't think Bob Chapek is a guy that really gives a damn what your politics are. I don't think he gives a damn what you put in the movies. As long as the movies actually produce results and actually
all he cares about is the audience.
Yeah, as long as if the fans are happy and the tickets are rolling in and we're selling merchandise and people are coming into the parks for this stuff, fine. I don't care. But the minute that stops, you got a problem. So
And which is
and I
what
mean,
you would think the CEO of a major media conglomerate would think like. But we've talked about that we are at this stage in history of Hollywood. We're sort of at the third generation of Hollywood, which is the generation of the people that are grandchildren of the people that found this town. They're not entrepreneurs.
the
They're
spoiled
lazy
brat
ass.
generation. Yeah, we see it in financial planning all the time.
Hey, see, you're you've dealt with the executive, the top executive whose grandfather's name is in the firm's head, right? And
Yep.
who doesn't have the mojo and the entrepreneurialism of the predecessor generations. And that Hollywood is at a death knell moment. And of course, but nothing dies. You're not going to see the death of the entertainment industry. You're going to see the death of a period. And this period is dying. And someone like Chapek is coming in and saying, okay, it's time to make money again. I don't know what you guys are thinking. That's what I'm hearing.
Right. Yeah, and just to be clear, and we stated this in the narrative video, and just to remind everybody, one of the things we talk about, when Feige was renewed in 2019, he was given that extra title of executive creative director of all of Marvel, kind of like what Dave Filoni just got over at Lucasfilm that we didn't find out about for 8 months. So he gets this in 2019, and we know that Kennedy's history of renewal under Iger was a 3-year term each time, the last one being in October of 2018, which is what I have kept saying on my channel, that would put us at about October of this year, 2021, to where we'd probably see a new CEO of Lucasfilm, because I seriously don't think it's going to be Kennedy anymore. There's no reason to.
Despite all the constant murmuring, not with this guy, Chapek, she's not around. He's not.
No.
And the fact we're not even seeing her mentioned anymore in articles about how he's trying to take control of Disney. We don't even see Lucasfilm mentioned because he's already taken care of it.
I don't know anybody. The last time anybody has seen her in person, but that's for another video.
Yeah,
no, but one of the things was with Feige, though. So if we assume for a second he was renewed in 2019, we have to presume that Iger probably at least consigned him to another 3 years, if not longer. Because that was done in October, or at least it was announced in October of that year.
And Chapek is not the CEO then. Chapek
right, exactly. And that's one of the things we state in the video is that Kennedy and Feige are not Chapek people. They're Iger people, period. So, but even if Feige wound up getting a 5-year deal to basically carry him through the extent of what we presume to be all of phase 4 at this point, it's not like, just like with Kennedy, it's not an easy hill to get over to just, let's just up and fire this guy because he's not performing. There comes an amazing amount of costs, legal battles, all kind of crap that goes with it. So this is nothing that's going to happen tomorrow or next year if Shang-Chi and the Eternals bomb too. Chapek is looking at this, my opinion, like, oh, God, dog, I'm stuck with this son of a bitch for the next 3 or 4 years, no matter what he does.
Unless he blows his wad. Unless he blows his wad, unless he ruins his own reputation and his own myth as the invincible genius of Marvel, which already was being chipped away with a sort of mediocre B-level content that we've been seeing for about
Wanda, Falcon, Loki. Even if you pull up the Samba TV numbers on this,
it's
B game, C game. You look at the Samba TV numbers on those shows that have come out, and this was supposed to be a huge deal for Disney Plus. The reality is the Samba numbers on like the preview days were 1 million or less, and even for the whole week after that, it might have been 1 or 2 million, and that was in the U.S. You're talking about like 1 or 2% of Disney Plus subscribers, 1 to 2% were watching these shows.
I mean, I think Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC was doing better than this, right? You'd have to look at the numbers on that. I think they had more viewers, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, they were talking about how many households. I think the last episode of Loki, maybe you had, 1 million, maybe 2 million. But again, that's
I work
nothing.
at the CW, man. That's CW level stuff. And we're talking about Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on ABC. That's probably getting at least 5-6 million. We'd have to look back at the figures at it, but it wasn't getting that.
Yeah, no, and that's, but even if it was, I mean, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was so detached from the rest of the MCU. Yeah. These are these are the actual actors. This is Tom Hiddleston. This is, I mean, this is, these are the actual actors in the same roles that they were in in the $23 billion theatrical juggernaut that
but
was
being given B and
through.
C stories with those characters.
Yeah. So and not to mention the fact that I don't see, I mean, is anybody buying Sylvie merchandise in mass? No. I mean, all this kind of stuff. And that's what we talked about again in the narrative was if I'm Chapek and I'm sitting there and I've got Kevin Feige, who's supposed to be the golden boy. And in the last 2 years, he's handed me nothing that has really driven, number one, new subs to Disney Plus, because the numbers that we got new Disney numbers today from the financial reports really hasn't driven much of any new subs to Disney Plus, number one. Number two,
he was
not driving any merch.
To the Gina Carano effect. Right?
Yeah.
People stopped watching, some of the stuff because, they didn't come in for Feige's things when they got pissed off over Carano.
Yeah, but I mean, it's they're not driving subs. He's not driving new merch, and in turn, that's not going to drive any. I mean, all this new stuff is not driving any new interest for the parks or anything else. I mean, at this point, I'm looking at this like I told my kids when we walked out of the theater that night for Endgame, that's it. The MCU's done. Look, Dad, what do you mean? They got new movies coming out. I'm like, no, trust me. It's done.
I felt it.
The writing's on the wall. Yeah,
I felt it too. It really was the end of this sort of A-quality stuff because you're like, Iron Man's not around anymore. Black Widow's not around anymore.
Cap.
I don't care about it. Marvel. I don't give a crap about Captain Marvel. Whatever. Cap's not.
No. Captain America. Yeah. Captain Marvel, and they forced her in there at the last minute.
The filmmakers of Endgame knew what was happening. So we saw in that screenplay where the character's like, "Who's this chick?" Right? I mean, that's clearly like the character's like, "Who's this chick?" I mean, you come out of nowhere into our story. The characters say that. Yeah. I mean, that's clearly the filmmakers going, "What is this crap?" Right? And so you already see this rebellion. The directors put that in there. It
was the most ridiculous Deus Ex Machina for the entire MCU.
Yeah, and she got punched by Thanos for all the talk. I mean, that was clearly the beginnings of a disconnect that was happening, right? With this highly pushed storyline that people are like, well, why is Captain Marvel being pushed here? And then even the filmmakers like, I don't know about this character. Let's just humiliate it a little bit and get it out of the screen. So, I mean, those are people like, Kevin, where are we going with this, right? And Chapek's watching this going, yeah, I don't know about this, right? And so now he's stuck with these characters. And look, he's just gone through a year-long war with Kathleen Kennedy, who everyone said was invincible, immovable, untouchable, and who then, messed with his money by the Gina Carano game. And he took care of it. And she's vanished, right? And now you're seeing The Atlantic talking about how Jon Favreau is the future of Star Wars. He took care of it, right? So this guy shows up creating drama. This guy's creating drama and sending Scarlett Johansson to sue him and try to humiliate him publicly. No, he's not gonna accept that.
No, he got stuck with these two characters, Kennedy and Feige, and then again,
one who has real talent, but maybe has bought into his myth at this point.
That could very well be, but it's like you said, here was a guy that, Favreau was making him money. He was the only guy at Lucasfilm making them money. And then Kennedy, who broke the fandom, just decides to go ahead and skunk Favreau by getting rid of Gina and sinking one of the shows and making him, I mean, all the production delays that
and sinking the toys, which is what he cares about. Sinking this second highest, selling toys no longer, on market.
Yeah. So like I said, I kept looking at this. I saw this article and I'm like, the more I read about this and, the things that one of the first things that was written when Chapek took over earlier this year, after the 1 year delay was Chapek not only talking about, well, we're going to move 2,000 mid and upper level management parks people from California to Florida. And that ain't the end of it, folks. Like I said earlier, is also, one of the big things he seemed to talk about.
That's also a political move, not just internally Disney. It's a political move against the governor of California.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. No. But I was just going to add to that. The other things I found interesting was him talking about in these same articles, places like Variety, Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, that they were going to shift back to a focus of a distribution, basically money, over, letting the artists do whatever they want. And then the big one was, and I'm like, I knew exactly what he was talking about when he said, you know what? I'm not a big fan of these long-term executive contracts. Those saw days that too. Are over. And everybody initially thought, we know who he's talking about in particular is Kennedy. And I'm sure there's some others there as well, but that was definitely one of them. And then the more I read the story and the more I see this crap up with the ScarJo situation and all this going on, I'm thinking, I think Kevin Feige might have been in that
Oh no,
in that
he was
number
already
too.
in that. Chapek has already had to deal with the humiliation of having his power taken away within days of being given his role, and then Iger just waltzes back in and says, "I'm taking back." I mean, that was incredibly humiliating. I've never seen anything like it, right? And then watching, and then watching Kathleen Kennedy go, "This guy's a chump. He's not even in charge. I'll do whatever I want. Gina Carano, let's get rid of her. I'm going to mess this. I'm going to throw a wrench into this." And he's like, "All right, okay. Now it's time. I'm not messing around. This is my company, and we're done here. So Bob, watch this." And so he's like, "You couldn't take care of her. I just took care of her. Oh, this guy's been mouthing off. Okay." And so let's talk for a second about Shang-Chi and about the Eternals, right? I think they're going to both be disasters. I could be proven wrong, but my instinct is they're going to be major bombs, and it's going to damage Kevin Feige's PR in this town. It's also going to damage those people in this town that the people in this town they're all, look, first of all, everyone I work with, they're all just a bunch of liberal racists, right? Just a bunch of and so they're all like, well, how do we get this? How do we get some stuff for these yellow man in China, right? That's how they think, right? And so they think like that, right? And so we gotta get those yellow guys something, right? That's how they think. And so that's where this Shang-Chi is coming from. And no disrespect to the actor, a filmmaker, I'm just like, yeah, but I mean, if you wanted to do this, and this character should have been introduced in the MCU and development, where's this guy coming from? No one's going to watch a standalone movie. It's not a character anybody cares about. The Chinese don't want this. So this is, what are you doing here? And for all the people in the industry who are like, oh, we got to get that Chinese yellow money, right? Like, hey, man, you didn't get the money, right? And so, that's going to, it's like, okay, go. I mean, there's a reason Chapek didn't put, Black Widow out in China, because he's figured out that China ain't the future. It's what I said months ago to Andre at Midnight's Edge. This town, the smart people, which is like 3 people, figured out China is not the future. They're not this imaginary golden pot at the end of the rainbow of China. Doesn't exist. They're never going to give us money. We're just going to shame ourselves. Like John Cena humiliated himself to make the Chinese happy. Didn't help Fast and Furious 9, right? It made no difference. It actually probably worsened it. They had no respect for him with having no spine, right? And so, so we're going to watch Chapek going, okay, yeah, China's the future. Oh, you didn't like what you didn't, or he probably had that conversation with, Feige Paul and say, man, you should release this in China. It's like, hey, China's not the future of this company. Yes, it is. Okay. Let's get your Shang-Chi out there. Let's get it out there. Let's see if this is the future of the company.
And they tried to use the excuse that, well, they set it for July 9th, and the reason China didn't allow it in was because that was the month they were doing the 100th anniversary celebration of the CCP.
But that's what happens in China. That's what happens. We've got to honor Mao Zedong, whatever. This is all this crap. That's always going to happen.
The fact that they all get up in arms and they get crazy over sharing 25% roughly of the box from China, because that's all the CCP lets them take. Yeah. So, I mean, it's like,
CCP doesn't want to give them that much. They consider it beneath them to be even giving them that much.
Yeah, and I mean, unless you're like an F9 or something like that, or the previous Fast and the Furious, even some of the Transformers films that would do like, almost $1 billion in China alone. 25% of that is still pretty good money, and that pays for the production budget. But if you go into China and you slap out a movie that's going to make maybe 100 to 200 million in China, okay, we get 25, 50 million of that, and then that's if you can get it in there, So it's just interesting to me, and all of this just struck me as I think the story with Kevin Feige is going to keep getting interesting, and I think
it's going to get ugly, my friend. It's going to get interesting and ugly, because the difference is, Miss Kennedy knew that the fans were against her. And a lot of her reactions were poorly thought out in relationship to that, and probably came from a place of vengeance and anger, right? Which isn't good strategy. Mr. Feige has a decade of fan love, which has perhaps given him a false perception of where he currently is and where the product is. So when that is taken away from him, which I think it will start happening with the upcoming failures that we're about to watch happen, then I think he's gonna get really upset and vengeful. And I think now that Chapek knows what he's dealing with, he knows he's dealing with a guy that will send an actress to sue him to humiliate him. He knows that. He's going to be ready, and it's going to get a little ugly.
Yeah, that's the way it seems to me. Well, Cameron, I appreciate your time tonight. And if anybody wants to check Cameron out, I know you're still running around on Instagram.
So that's all I got left. Cameron Pasha 72 at Instagram. I'm off of Twitter, but I'm there and I post every now and then. And if anyone wants, I've got my website is my name, CameronPasha.com, and I've got a couple of novels published, and you can purchase them through Amazon or through my website.
Awesome. And you can also find Cameron floating around the halls like I am at Midnight's Edge on occasion. So we appreciate you being here. Thanks so much, Cameron. And to everybody out there, please make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. And until next time, take care.